The wind howled through the barren trees, carrying with it the icy bite of winter. Snow blanketed the forest floor, muffling the hurried footsteps of the search party as they trudged through the drifts. Lanterns swaying in the night. Daniel Carter, the sheriff, scanned the dense woods with sharp, calculating eyes. He had seen many things in his years on the force, but nothing like this. A 2-year-old child had vanished from a cabin on the outskirts of town, leaving behind only an open door and tiny footprints leading into the storm. The mother's screams still echoed in his mind, her face streaked with tears. Beside him, Claire Whitmore, a wildlife biologist, adjusted her rifle strap. A child wouldn't survive out here alone. If the cold doesn't take them, something else will. Daniel tightened his jaw. We'll find them. We have to. The group pressed forward, their breath visible in the freezing air. Then from somewhere deep in the forest, a wolf's howl cut through the silence. A second, then a third, until the night was filled with eerie, mournful calls. Daniel exchanged a glance with Claire. Wolves. They followed the sound, their boots crunching through the snow, hearts pounding with dread. As they crested a ridge, their lanterns illuminated a clearing, and there, in the center of it, was a sight that made them freeze. A pack of wolves, 6, maybe 7, stood in a tight formation, their bodies shielding something small, something unmoving. Daniel slowly raised his rifle, his pulse hammering. Dear God! Claire gripped his arm. Wait! One of the wolves turned its head toward them, its golden eyes catching the light. It didn't snarl, didn't move to attack. It simply watched. Daniel took a cautious step forward, bracing for the worst. But as he did, the pack parted slightly, revealing what lay beneath them. A baby, wrapped in nothing but a thin onesie, its tiny body nestled in the snow. But it was alive, breathing. And then, to their utter disbelief, the child let out a soft, sleepy sigh, protected, warmed by the bodies of the wolves. Daniel lowered his rifle, his breath caught in his throat. This can't be real. Claire knelt beside the baby, her hands trembling as she scooped the child into her arms. The wolves didn't resist. They merely watched, their golden eyes unreadable. She pressed her fingers to the baby's cheek. Still warm, still alive. The search party stood in stunned silence, the only sound the wind rustling through the trees. One of the wolves, a large black male, took a step forward, sniffing at Claire's boots before turning away. With a single flick of its tail, the pack retreated into the darkness, disappearing as silently as they had come. The baby stirred in Claire's arms, letting out a small, drowsy whimper. Daniel exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Let's get this kid home. But even as they made their way back through the snow, the image of those wolves, standing guard over something so fragile, burned itself into their memories, and none of them could shake the question that would haunt them for years to come. Why? The cabin was alight with the warm glow of lanterns when they arrived, the desperate cries of the child's mother filling the cold night air. Claire stepped inside first, cradling the baby tightly as the mother, Sarah Whitman, turned toward the door. The moment her eyes landed on the bundle in Claire's arms, she let out a strangled sob. My baby, Sarah whispered, hands trembling as she reached forward. Claire gently placed the child into her arms. The baby stirred, rubbing its tiny fists against sleepy eyes before letting out a soft coo. Sarah let out a breathless laugh, tears streaming down her face. Daniel stood nearby, watching the reunion unfold. He had seen grief before, raw and merciless, but now he was witnessing something rare, a miracle. Sarah kissed the top of the baby's head, then turned to Daniel and Claire, her expression shifting. Where did you find him? How did he survive? The room fell into silence. Daniel hesitated. How did they explain what they had seen? How could they make sense of something that defied logic? Claire spoke first. He was with the wolves. Sarah's face paled. Wolves? They weren't attacking him, Claire continued. They were protecting him, keeping him warm. Sarah clutched the baby tighter. That's not possible. Daniel ran a hand over his face, exhaustion weighing on him. I don't have an explanation, but we all saw it. A murmur rippled through the small crowd gathered in the cabin. Neighbors, volunteers, people who had spent the last 24 hours searching for a child they had assumed was lost to the cold. An old man in the corner, his face weathered from years of living in the mountains, cleared his throat. "You ever hear the legend of the Black Wolf?" All eyes turned to him. Daniel crossed his arms. "What legend?" The old man leaned forward, voice low. "Long ago, there was a wolf pack that roamed these woods. They say the Black Wolf was their leader, but he wasn't just any wolf. He had a connection to the land, to the people. It's said that in times of great need, when an innocent life is at stake, the pack intervenes. They don't harm, they protect." Claire frowned. "That's just a story." "Maybe," the old man shrugged. "Or maybe it's why that baby's still breathing." A heavy silence filled the room. Sarah kissed her child's forehead again, her grip never loosening. "I don't care what saved him. I just thank God he's here." Daniel met Claire's gaze. There was logic, and then there was what they had seen with their own eyes. And deep in his gut, he knew. Some things couldn't be explained. Some things weren't meant to be. Days passed, and life slowly returned to normal. The search efforts ceased, the town moved on, and Sarah, now more protective than ever, rarely let her child out of her sight. But Daniel couldn't shake it. He found himself returning to the forest, standing in the clearing where the wolves had been. Snow had covered the tracks, erasing all signs of what had happened. But as he stood there, breathing in the crisp air, he felt it, an unseen presence, a feeling that something had been watching, and maybe still was. He turned to leave but stopped when he spotted something in the distance. A lone black wolf, standing at the edge of the trees, golden eyes locked onto his. It didn't move, didn't run. It simply watched. Daniel's pulse quickened, but he didn't reach for his gun. He just stood there, staring back. A moment passed, heavy with unspoken understanding. Then, as silently as it had appeared, the wolf turned and disappeared into the woods. Daniel let out a slow breath, a realization settling over him. Some debts couldn't be repaid, and some protectors walked on four legs.